So, in our last lecture, as you can remember, we have talked about the definition of verbs and its types. So, for this video, or for this video lecture, we will be discussing the module 2, which is the introduction of the properties of noun, mainly focusing on the voices and moods of verbs. So, first, we are going to talk about voices of verbs. So, there are two voices of verbs, which are active voice and passive voice. So we are going to first discuss about active voice, followed by the discussion of passive, and will be followed by the conversion process. So active voice is when the subject is the doer of the action. This is most um, this is the most common type of sentence that is being used, especially when it comes to expressing opinion with the use of verbs, and it follows the formula subject, which is the doer of the action, plus verb and object or receiver of the action. Most of the sentences in the example for active voice is the object is the direct object or answers the who or what is the action for, because it is the receiver of the action. We discussed direct object in the last lecture video. So I have here an example, two examples. The first one is Isa drinks coffee. So as we can see, the it follows exactly the formula that is given. As we can see there, follow the laser. As you can see there, when we say subject or the doer of the action, who does the verb or who drinks the coffee? And the answer is this one, Isa. So Isa is the subject or the doer of the action. So as what we've used a while back, red determines the subject, and the teal one or this color and determines the predicate or the object. So what follows following the subject in the formula is the verb, and what follows Isa is drinks. Drinks is a verb. So this is the action being done by the subject. Now, for the last part of the formula and the last part of the sentence is the object or the receiver of the action. What is being drink? Coffee. Therefore, the object or the receiver of the action is coffee. So, as you can see, this one strictly followed the formula of active voice. However, if we have here another example, which is not, which exactly does not follow the formula. However, it's still the same from the first one. We can see that the subject, the doer of the action. First, we are going to locate the verb. What is the verb in the sentence? Eats. Very good. The verb of the sentence is eats. Now, to determine the subject, we are going to ask the question, who is doing the verb? Who is eating? Who eats? And it's Mark. So Mark is eating what, or what is being eaten? And the answer to that question, I know that you already know, is hamburger. So you can see here that there is an extra there is an extra phrase or extra words, but that doesn't affect the sentence. It still is an active voice. Not because it has an extra not because it has an extra word or phrase doesn't mean that it must or it will not be considered as an active voice. So I hope you understood active voice, because we will now be going to delve, or we will now be discussing about passive voice. So passive voice is when the subject acts as the receiver of the action. So it is the contradictory, or it contradicts the active voice, because in the active voice the subject is the doer of the action. However, in the passive voice, The subject is the receiver of the action. What is the receiver of the action in the active voice? The object or the predicate. So for this one, here is a tip or a trivia. Passive voice is often identified through the word by or the by phrase, and it follows the following formula. You can see it is kind of complicated by how it looks, but as we explain and delve deeper, we can really understand or we can analyze the given formula. So the formula is subject, which is now the receiver of the action, the be verb. So what are the be verbs? We've discussed this on the last lecture, and the be verbs are is, are, was, were, and am. And it is determined by the tense of the verb in active, which will this phrase will help us later on during the conversion. And the next part of the sentence would be the past tense or the past participle tense of the verb. And next is the by word or the which will start the by phrase, and the last one is the object, which is now the doer of the action. So here are following examples. We can see there that Wesley is the subject and it is the receiver of the action because the verb fed or was fed is no longer done by Wesley. Rather, it was done by Angelica. So as we can see there, I'm sorry, wrong color. Okay, so as we can see there, um, Wesley by fed. So as we are going to, if we are going to find the doer of the action, we are going to ask who fed or who is doing the feeding, who fed Wesley, and it is Angelica. So we can see, we are going to write, I don't have my um, mouse with me. So Angelica is the doer of the action. And now Angelica is the doer of the action. And who is being fed? Who was being fed? And it is Wesley. If you can see how it differs. So in the past video, the doer of the action is the subject. However, in this example, in the passive voice, the the doer of the action is the object or the last or the predicate. But in the active voice, the doer or Angelica would be the subject of the sentence. So another example is that the flowers were bought at the parlor by my mom. So same as true with the first example. In the second example of active voice, this does not strictly follow the given formula. However, we are going to identify the verb first. So the verb in this are is or are rather because there were two were bought. So please don't remember that this is that were is used as an auxiliary or a helping verb and bought is the main verb. So who bought the flowers? We are first going to identify the doer. Who bought the flowers? The flowers were bought by mom. So my mom is the doer of my mom is the doer of the action. So and who receives the action? What is being bought? And the answer are the flowers. Therefore, as you can see there, it still follows the formula because the subject or the receiver of the action, which was flowers, and the next one is be verbs, determined by the tense of the verb in the active. Be verbs, which were, was, and were. I already mentioned this one. I mentioned a while back what were the be verbs, and The be verbs in the sentences given are, was, and were, and the past participle or the past tense of the verb is fed and bought. And the last one, second to the last one, is the presence of the phrase by. As you can see, there is the phrase by. You can see that both the sentences consists the word or the phrase by. And for the last one is the object or the doer of the action, which were labeled and even underlined and labeled are Angelica and my mom. So I hope you understood passive voice. For we will now be delving, or we will now be moving to the conversion of sentences from active to passive. So I will be presenting both the formula for us to have a closer or a side-to-side analysis in the sentences. So here is the sentence that I presented as an example. Isa ate the burger. So in this one, we can see there that as what we labeled, Isa is the subject, ate is the verb, the burger is the object or the receiver of the burger or the receiver of the action. So now we will now disregard this one because we checked how accurate it is to the formula of the active. Now we are going to move to convert this sentence using this formula. So what is the receiver of the action? Who or what is the receiver of the action? The burger. Now it will now be the subject of the converted sentence. Therefore, we are going to write the burger. Now, what follows the subject in the passive voice is the be verb. So, how are we going to determine what be verb are we going to use? So, you will now consider the tense of the verb, the tense of this verb. Okay, I'm going to use another color. So, you will now going to consider the tense of our verb, which is ate. So, ate is at what tense? Was it in present, past, or future? It is in the past. Therefore, if this is in the past and your subject is singular, you will be using was as the be verb. So the be verb to be used in the sentence will be was. Now that we have identified the be verb to be used, we are now going to move to the next part of our formula, which is the past tense or the past participle tense of the verb. So our verb here is ate, and what is the past participle of the verb? What is the past participle of the word of the verb ate? Eaten. Now we are going to add eaten as a part of the sentence because it is the next part. Now, this is already predeterminant, or this is already a this is already a permanent word without any consideration. So we are just going to add the word by. And lastly, we are going to add the object, which is the doer of the action in the active sentence. So we can see there that we have already labeled the subject in the active sentence. So we're just going to add the subject of the former of the active. So if we're going to take a close comparison of the two, this is, please do not be confused. This is the active voice and this is the passive voice. So we are going to take a close comparison. take a look at the difference. So subject is the doer of the action in the active, which is I. So Isa eats the burger. Isa is doing the action. However, in this one, Isa, even if she was the doer of the action, she was placed as an object. So if we are going to identify the parts of this sentence, Isa is no longer the subject. The subject of this sentence is all now the burger. The verb was eaten, and the presence of the by phrase we cannot eradicate by because it is permanent part of our formula. And lastly, our object will be Isa. So as you can see there that the object of the object of the active is now the subject of the passive, and the subject of the active is now the object of the passive. So I hope you understood the conversion of sentences from active to passive, because we will now be moving, or we will now be converting sentences on the other way around, which is passive to uh, passive to active voice. So same is true with what I've done, or what I've done to the past slide. We are now I will be presenting with you both the formula of active and passive voice for you to have a close comparison, or for us to have a close comparison. So the example that I will be giving you will be the more complicated one for you to have a guide in the learning activities that were given. So I hope that you are following through with our topic, because this is included in your module, in your learning module. So I hope that you're watching this video with your learning module by your side. So we are going to identify now the parts of the sentence using this formula. So the subject, or the receiver of the action, will be the flowers, sorry, will be the flowers, and the verb will be the be verb determined by tense. The verb will be this one. The main verb, we'll use black for that one. The main verb will be this. And next, or what comes through the main verb, is the word by, which is a permanent part of the formula. And the last one is the object, or the doer of the action, which is my mom. So now that we've identified the parts of this sentence using this formula, we are now going to convert the sentence from passive to active. So we will now be using this formula to convert. Now that we are in the active, please keep in mind that most of the time we will not be using this word, or this byword will not be in our sentence. So next one is identifying the subject, or the doer of the action in this sentence. So this is where the by phrase, or the byword, becomes a help, because most of the time what follows the byword is the doer of the action, which will serve as our subject for the active sentence. So the subject, or the doer of the action in this, is my mom, which will now be the subject for our active sentence. So what follows our subject in here is the verb, which is most of the time the main verb of our passive sentence. So as we can see here, both is added because flowers are both is added because flowers I no no were was added because flowers are plural and this be verbs helps as an auxiliary verb in order to help giving or help connecting the main verb to the subject verb for it to go with the rules of grammar when it comes to subject and subject verb agreement. So we are now going to, in this sentence, we are going to disregard the be verb. We are now going to disregard the be verb and we will not include any be verb at the active sentence. Therefore, we are just going to adapt the main verb of our sentence or our example and use it as the verb for our active. So my mom, what follows the subject is the verb which is bought, and the last one is the receiver. The last part of our formula is the receiver of the action or who or what or who was the action being done for, and the answer is the subject of the former or the subject of the passive which is the flowers. So at the parlor, I've added at the parlor because it modifies or it is the phrase that modifies where my mom bought the flowers. It is a preposition of place which modifies the location or where that action came from. So, or where did that action happen, rather. As we can see there, we are now going to also label the active sentence using this formula. This formula now. So first is subject, which is the doer of the action, which is my mom. The verb, which is, we only have one verb in here, which is bought. And wait for a moment. The bought. And the last one is the receiver of the action, which answers the question what or who was being bought, and it is the flowers. So now that you have studied um, the difference of active and passive and the conversion of active to passive and passive to active, we're now going to move to the lesson 3, which is talk about the moods of verbs which composed of three, which are indicative, imperative, and subjunctive moods rather. So for the first one, we have indicative mood, which is the mood of verb stating a fact, an opinion, or a question. So an example of this one is March is starting to be humid. So what do you think is this example? What do you think is being stated in this example? So March is starting to be humid is stating a fact because as of now we are experiencing heat rather or way hotter than we experienced from the past month because it is now the start of the summer in the Philippines. So um, another example for this one is an opinion wherein we can say that Karen sings greatly or Karen dances correctly. Karen dances gracefully rather. So in the sentence that I said, some people will not agree with your point. However, you are just indicating an opinion. Therefore, you are speaking in an indicative mode. So another one is the question which says that our teacher teaches perfectly, don't you think? Or doesn't she? So in that phrase or in the sentence rather that I said or I've expressed or asked a question. while still asking a question for waiting for an approval or a disapproval, but I still have expressed in indicative mood. So next mood is the imperative mood, which is the mood of verb stating a command or a request. So this is easy to spot because you are just or these sentences states command or a request. So the next one is the best or the um next one is a representation of a command which says leave. So that is a one word sentence, same as true with run, walk, and others sit, and other sentence other words that can stand or that can be a sentence on their own. So another example for this one that expresses request or states a request is please walk quietly. So notice the word or the presence of the word please, which is used to express a request. You can also use the word kindly hand me the book, or the phrase can you please keep your voice down? So those are the words that will be used in stating that can be used in stating a request. So next mode is the last one, which is subjunctive mode, which is the mood used or words or a sentence used to express suggestions, wishes, or desire. So this is the most uncommon uncommon mood of verb, and indicative is the most common one. So for subjunctive mood we have several examples, which is I wish to be the best. So from the word wish, it is a sentence that expresses wishes. So I wish to be the best out, or I wish to be part of the Dean's Lister this year. So you are wishing or you are expressing a wish up for something or a wish for a thing to happen. And the next example is if I were you, I would have stayed. So this is both this is a suggestion because you are suggesting for the person, or both this is both um an expression of suggestion and desire because you are desiring or you are expressing a desire to be the person, to be the person you are talking with because you use the pronoun you, and in the suggestion you are suggesting that you would have not done or you would have not left leave you would have not left the other person, or you would have stayed if you were the person or if you were him or her. So that sums up our lesson, and I hope finally you were able to understand lesson one, our module 2, which consists of lesson 2 and lesson 3. So for questions, do not hesitate to ask me through our social media groups. And now your task your task now is to answer the questions or answer the learning activities that I've prepared for you to do and submit them to me next meeting. So that is all for our video lecture for today, and thank you for listening.